Hey everyone, so I'm doing a quick wrap-up of my progress for the Biannual Bibliathon Winter 2016. I only completed 2 out of the 7 videos and I only managed to read 3 out of my 5 books. So, not great, but not bad for my first readathon. I'll do a full spoiler-full book talk about Soundless at the end of this video, but before I do that, I'll do a quick recap of all the books that I read. First up, Soundless by Richelle Mead. Second, Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Third, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Philosopher's Stone. I'm not American, Philosopher's Stone. Then, one of my first did not finishes. The Species Within by Kimberly Clark. Then, The Ring of 5 Dragons by Eric von Luspater, another DNF. So all up I read the first 3 books, which was Soundless, Cinder, and Harry Potter. I'll have a full book talk about Cinder coming out soon. You don't really need to hear my thoughts on Harry Potter. Harry Potter is a classic for a reason, and it was wonderful to reread it. But now, let's talk about Soundless by Richelle Mead, which was the group book for the Bibliathon. Unfortunately, I no longer have a physical copy of the book. I liked it that much that I've already gotten rid of it. I've already done a written review up on my website about some of the problems that I had with the book, but honestly, I don't even feel that that review properly scratched the surface of the problems that I had with it, so I'm going to do the video review and talk a little bit more in detail. Now, I understand that Richelle Mead is a very popular author. I haven't actually read her Vampire Diaries series. There's a lot of very popular YA series that I've not read yet that I'm slowly introducing myself to, and Vampire Academy is one of them. And I will say this for Soundless, considering the problems I had with it, this is a book that should have been a DNF. But the writing was quick and it was easy, so I can see why, if she's dealing with characters that are good and plots that are good, she would be a very enjoyable author to read. But now let's talk about the problems with Soundless, and just so you know, this is a spoiler review. I can't talk about some of my major problems without going into detail about the ending, so if you do want to read it, go ahead. There's never any shame in liking a book that someone else dislikes. More power to you. If I was trying to come up with a phrase to describe Soundless, it would be paper thin. There just doesn't feel to be a lot to this book past the premise and what is an unusual setting for a lot of YA. The premise, of course, being that it is a town that has lost its hearing and that is starting to lose its sight, and the main character has regained their hearing and they are off on a quest to save their village. The setting is China. I don't actually know exactly the time period where Richelle Mead has set it. You probably could find out based on the clues, but at the same time, it is a fantasy book, so let's say China inspired rather than actual China. So that is an interesting premise, the idea of a person regaining their hearing, but she doesn't really do anything with it. I understand a lot of people are able to forgive the book's flaws of fairly weak characters and a standard plot in favor of reading it because the premise is so unusual. But an unusual premise, if it's not executed well, I'm sorry, I'm just not buying it. I can't pretend to know what it is like to suddenly regain your hearing after being deaf your entire life. But if you sit quietly and just listen to what's around you, sound is constant. It is everywhere. So the idea that she can sort of just take this in her stride, that she is just like, yep, that sound, that must be a giggle, with very little consequence to her, I feel is unbelievable. If the book had been longer, if it had given her time to really go into this, if she'd been up for nights because she's hearing things and she can't deal with the sensory overload, I would think that would be a believable experience. It would be amazing but traumatic at the same time. But instead, she's just like, yep, cool, I need 1 sick day. 1. I'm good with 1 sick day, and then I'm fine, everything's fine, there's no problem at all. At one point, she's disorientated because of a gong. And that makes sense. That's the first super loud sound she's heard. But at the same time, Sound is never used against her. She is never completely out of her element because she's like, what is happening? What is so loud? It hurts. I don't understand. It's all still very much beautiful and whimsical and, oh, isn't it lovely? There's no consequence. There's no consequence to anything in this book. This book is without consequence, as proven by the love triangle. You did not need a love triangle. The rival, shall we say, who's the rich, snooty guy who's like, of course she's going to marry me because we're the best artists in the town. You could cut him out completely. He served no point whatsoever. And then the actual love interest was there needed because he needed to be physically strong, and that's it. There is no reason. She could have gone with a lifelong friend, and it still would have had just as much impact. But no, it's young adult. We need a love interest. We need a love triangle. That's how it works. And I hated it. To this day, I cannot tell you anything about his character. He is strong, and he is noble, and yes, that is it. But I suppose he's at least got more character than the main character, because the main character never falters from her path. He at least one point goes, why should we go back? Why should we protect the village where the status quo keeps us in these horrible lives? And she's like, no, we need to do the right thing. And I mean, that would be reasonable if we ever felt her struggle, but we don't. I've heard some people enjoy it in the fact that she is not a very stereotypical YA protagonist. She is not this kick-ass heroine who goes against society's rules. She is someone who wants to fit in. And that is a very reasonable thing. But if you're writing a character who wants to fit in, the way that you do it is either they want to fit in and they're struggling to do that, or they want to fit in and they realize maybe fitting in's not all what it's worth. A character who fits in, then there's no story in that. Boom, they fit in. That's well done, mission accomplished. That was frustrating. Because they had perfect setup for conflict with the fact that she was wanted to fit in. Because she's a painter. She's the best painter in the town. And the paint is only used to record the events of the village, and it is vital for the survival of the village that that is what happens. But she wants to spend her time painting these fantastical things in her head. She wants to paint these beautiful images. She wants to paint not just what she sees, but what she imagines. Perfect. Want versus need. Conflict. Except it's not, because we never see her struggle with this. She's not there trying to etch into a tree or sketch with charcoal or do anything that a person who's driven by these images that they see would do. So her being so, I've got to do what is best for society, I've got to follow my role, makes sense. It's just not interesting. Now let's get on to the ending, because the ending is the worst part. The ending is what dropped this book from a 3 if I was feeling generous to a 2, and probably could have dropped it to a 1. Not just by the Deus Ex Pixus. So Pixus is a mythological creature that is foreshadowed throughout the narrative. There's no doubt that they are mentioned. However, there's no sign of mythological happenings. There's no sign of anything magical until the end. There is a character who's trying to tell her something. And you get that was when I first picked up. I'm like, oh shit. Oh, we've got some Chosen One prophecy going on here when that happened. But at the same time, we don't see anything magical until the very end. Now here's where they all the villagers cry out and the Pixus come and they help the villagers. Now, that's weak. That's really weak. Instead, in this climactic battle, why not use the one weapon you have, which is the fact that you can't hear? Use noise against your enemies. Confuse, confuddle them. You've got someone who understands hearing who can now direct it. She should have been through this traumatic experience of suddenly getting her hearing back. She would understand how it can be utilized. Have the villagers rise up and use sound to drive the armies away. But no. Deus Ex Pixus. Down they come, and what really frustrates me about this is the Pixus had run away. They had left and taken all the sound with them. Why? because man had started to kill them. So okay, so the Pixies are not immortal, they are very, very much killable. Except when the plot demands they're not, because then they come back, it's like, fire the arrows, shoot them with spears, blow them up, all these sorts of things, and the Pixies are just like, nothing. Killed all the men, it's all excellent, everything's fine, and the main character is rewarded for following their path by now being able to paint these mythical creatures that she's seen in her head, because now they're real, and therefore recording the actual events of the city means that she has to paint them. Is the king going to come back, though? The king who wanted the minerals in this mountain that they're mining so desperately that he was slaughtering these mythical creatures, he still has a way to slaughter them. That's been established in the book. He's gonna come back, but nope, everything's good. We're fine. Consequence, schmonsequence. It's all good. Now, if you like this book, great. I'm not trying to rain on your parade. Creative mediums, everyone likes different things. But for me, that book needed to go off my shelves. Sorry. The writing was enjoyable, it was snappy and quick-paced, so I am interested in picking up the Vampire Academy books. I actually just watched the movie, and while the movie's not great, but it's fun, and I'm like, okay, these characters are fun, I'm actually keen to see what they do. So yeah, that's all for the Biannual Bibliathon Winter 2016 from me. Stay tuned because I will be doing book reviews on Cinder and Throne of Glass and a whole bunch of others that I've read this year, because this year's been pretty amazing for books. After a 2-year hiatus, I am back reading and it feels so good. Alright, if you want to follow me on any of my other websites, all the information's down below in the description. Like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you next time. Laters.